Hey, welcome back to the House of Trauma podcast. It's your favorite podcast host, Kiana Brienne. Now let's get into it. It's been a while and I missed y'all and I hope y'all missed me too. So welcome back for season 2 of the House of Trauma podcast. I know it's been a while and I want to first apologize for my absence. I swear I can explain. I swear. So where have I been? Well, to be honest, I needed to take a break for a number of reasons. The main reason being I just needed a mental break. My mind was so cloudy. It was so foggy. It just, I could barely think straight. Okay. I had a lot going on in my personal life and I just needed the time to take a break, to ensure that I was taking care of myself in order to be able to produce quality episodes, quality content, because my listeners deserve the best and not for me to come in and kind of half-ass it, so to speak. Sometimes when I'm working on things, whether it's my podcast or other projects that I have going on, when I can't fully focus and, my mind isn't right and my life is kind of shattered, I just have to stop. Like, I just have to take a break and I have to take care of me and I have to kind of get it together. Otherwise, I'm constantly going on a spinning wheel and nothing's happening. So I needed that break and I'm back and I'm so excited to be back for the start of a Mental Health Awareness Month. That's right. It is May 1st, 2024, and we are just at the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month. So I do want to talk a little bit about that a little later in the episode, but first, a few life updates. First and foremost, I have to share this one first because it's what I'm most excited about. So last weekend, I got baptized. Yes, that's right. I finally got baptized. It was such a beautiful experience. My Dallas bestie actually, we flew out to LA together to go to church. The church I've been going to was hosting a baptism. And so we both got baptized together and it was a beautiful experience. It was so crazy, actually. Everything that happened when we were trying to get to LA. And I was like, I feel like the devil trying to stop me and you will not. So we made it. The entire weekend was beautiful. We got baptized on Saturday. We went to church on Sunday. Pastor Ebenezer did an amazing service. It truly blessed me and put a lot of things into perspective for me moving forward. On a similar topic, or pretty much that same topic, I'm just in a space where I'm redevoting my life to God. I talked a lot about, what it was like being traumatized, dating in Dallas, and then, kind of transitioning to dating myself. And now I'm dating God. And I'm so excited for this experience. I'm so excited for this time in my life. I'm so excited and so grateful and so blessed for everything that is happening and everything that is going to happen in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. I've never felt so, I've never felt so excited. I've never felt so happy. I've never felt so grateful. And, it's about to be a journey and I can't wait to share every moment of it with you all as I continue on my spiritual journey and my self-love healing journey. Also, I've officially been with my new airline, Alaska Airlines, for 6 months, which means that I'm officially off probation. Woohoo! I made it. So basically with every airline, they give you, it's usually 6 months, but it can be up to 12 months or a year, where it's kind of like, how do I describe probation? So they kept saying it's still a part of the interview process. They kind of want to see, how will you do transitioning to the job? Things are a lot more strict when you're on probation. So me and my classmates recently celebrated getting off probation. And I just feel like a huge weight is lifted off my shoulder. It's like, if you have never been in the aviation industry, then I just don't know that you understand or that I could fully explain it. But again, so many exciting things have been happening for me and for the House of Trauma. So we are officially now available on YouTube. Yes, that's right. You can now stream the House of Trauma. All episodes, all past, present, and future episodes are available on YouTube at House of Trauma, or you can search House of Trauma Podcast. And with that being said, it gets me into what's coming next. And that's video content. That's right. The next step on this YouTube boat is video content. And so many more things that I just can't get into right now. But of course, I'll update you as they come. But we'll be getting into video content. So you don't only have to listen to my voice, you can also see my face. And it's going to be great. So I'm focusing on staying consistent and being confident in my consistency and in the work that I put out there and the things that I'm doing with this podcast. And one of the biggest reasons that I haven't been as consistent as I would like is because I get a little discouraged when I don't feel like I'm getting the results that I feel I deserve. But I've come to the realization that when starting the House of Trauma podcast, my goal was to reach at least one person. That if I could reach one person and make an impact in their life, which I have, and I thank everyone for the reviews, for the kind words, for the amazing feedback that they've given me. So I've already accomplished my goal. And I'm committed to not focusing on the numbers, but focusing on the impact, focusing on the goal, focusing on the message and the intent of what this podcast was meant to be. So I just want to thank everyone who has been along for the journey and who will be joining the journey. And most importantly, I thank God for helping me find my voice and pushing me into this movement, because that's really truly what it is. It's a healing movement. And we will continue to heal our traumas. We will continue to love ourselves and love everyone around us and continue to grow in all the areas in our lives in which we need to grow. So buckle up. It's time to go for a ride. And all 43 episodes of season 1 of the House of Trauma are available to stream and binge on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. So I encourage you to go back and listen to any episodes you may have missed and prepare for an amazing new season of the House of Trauma. Episodes will drop every single Wednesday consistently at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Now let's get into our Mental Health Awareness Month. May 1st to January 31st is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what is mental health awareness, right? Y'all know I love a good definition. It's the ongoing effect to reduce the stigma around mental illness and mental health conditions. Often, because of misconceptions about mental health and overall mental fitness, people often suffer in silence and their conditions go untreated. People suffer in silence a lot because the ugly stigma surrounding mental health forces us in society to almost feel ashamed, feel scared to speak out about our mental health. So one thing I know for certain that has always been an issue in the Black community is seeking help for your mental illness. I think an unfortunate truth is that a lot of times in our community, we don't believe that, or people don't believe, because I do, people don't believe that mental health is like a real thing or like, a real issue. And the truth of the matter is mental health is so real. Mental illnesses, mental disorders, these things are very real and they affect your day-to-day life. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And it affects how we think, how we feel, and most people don't know, it affects how people behave and determines how they handle stressful situations, and it affects how they relate to others and how they make choices on the day-to-day. So it's a wide range of things that affect our overall well-being. It's not just something that makes us feel sad or makes us feel angry. It affects how we deal with situations. It affects how we perceive ourselves and people around us. When we experience mental health problems, our thinking, our mood, and our behaviors could be affected. Now, this isn't a one-size-fits-all type of thing. You could be dealing with the same mental health condition, the same mental health disorder, the same mental health problem as your neighbor, as someone next to you, as your sibling, as your significant other, as someone who's living in your household. You guys could be experiencing the same thing, right? But that doesn't mean that everybody reacts to it the same. And I think that that's important to note, because a lot of times in society, we're hell-bent on comparing ourselves to others. I'm guilty of it myself. I'm so guilty of it, and I'll use an example, something like grief, right? When people are dealing with grief, they can go into a Great Depression and amongst other things. And as many of you know, I lost my dad a few years ago. And when I look at myself and my siblings and kind of how everyone handled that situation, when I look at how my grandmother handled it, when I look at how my stepmother handled it, when I looked at how my mom handled the passing of my father, it all looks so different. Yet we all knew this man. We all loved this man. He was amazing, and he was a huge part of all of our lives. And we all lost him at the same time in the same way. Yet we all handled it differently. And I bring up that specific example because I think it's the first one that came to my mind, for one, but it's also the easiest to explain. But again, I think it's important to note that everybody deals with their mental fitness differently. I always take pride in my mental strength. And that's not to say that I'm any better than anybody else, because I'm not. Nobody's better than anybody. But I'm able to endure a lot mentally, and that's a blessing and a curse. Because a lot of times people who are able to endure a lot mentally tend to fall the hardest when it's all said and done. And it doesn't serve you well to, and I had to learn this lesson myself, it doesn't serve you to endure in silence. If you're struggling mentally, it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help you. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't really even make you stronger to continue to deal with these things in silence. And that's why I think that advocating for mental health awareness and, spreading the facts and just talking about it in general is huge. And I think that it's so important, especially in the Black community, because it's so real. It's so real. And there's so many resources available now. There's so many different things, different steps, different actions that we can take in order to increase our mental health overall, in order to prevent the silent suffering. I've said it once, maybe 10 times, but I'll say it again. I'm no expert on anything. I don't claim to be. I don't pretend to be. I did do some research, more research on mental health awareness because, again, I'm no expert and I don't know everything. I don't have all the facts, but it's an important topic for me because I have suffered in silence because I was ashamed before, and I don't want that for anybody else. Nor should you want that for yourself. And mental health is important at every stage in life. At every single stage in your life. Mental health is important. It's important as a child. It's important as in adolescence. And it's important as an adult. It's equally important in every stage of your life. And I think that when we talk about breaking generational curses and cycles, that mental health should be at the forefront of that conversation. Gone are the days of being ashamed of talking about your mental health. Gone are the days of, being ashamed to speak out when you're battling things like anxiety or depression. It's time to put an end to thinking that therapy is not necessary. Black people, I truly believe that most, if not all, living, breathing humans should go to therapy at some point in their life. I'm in therapy right now, and I've gone to therapy numerous times in the past at different stages in my life. And it doesn't have to be something that's continuously ongoing. It doesn't have to be something that's every day. It doesn't even have to be something that's every week. It, again, is not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. You have to find the therapist that works for you, the timeline that works for you. And, it can be kind of intimidating, I know, to take that step, to start therapy, to, walk into a room with a perfect stranger and spill your guts and tell them what's bothering you, what's weighing heavy on you, what's bringing you down on a daily basis. And honestly, you don't even have to walk into a room these days. I speak to my therapist via video chat. There's therapists that will text you, chat you, email you, talk over the phone. Like, there's so many options. And this is why I believe that there's no greater time than now to do it, to get it done, to take your mental health seriously, and to take the steps necessary to ensure that your mental strength is at its peak. And I can't emphasize enough that there is nothing to be ashamed of. It's important to take care of yourself mentally and physically, just in general. And now we know that, not having a strong mental state can be what's affecting your thinking, your mood, and your behavior. So I've been recently binge watching Law and Order SVU. Yes, I know. It's just one of those shows. It's like my comfort show. Like, it's so good all the time. And I've just been like binging all the seasons. And I think that I'm caught. It's like 20 or 22 seasons. And I'm convinced that in the last month and a half, I've watched every single episode of every season. But I said all that to say that when I'm watching Special Victims Unit, and typically when there's something going on with a child, a heinous act behind, the scenes, the first indication is a behavioral change. And I think that as parents and just as people, we as a society don't pay enough attention. We're quick to say, write the behavior off as being disobedient, or, all of a sudden this person's out of control. But a lot of times when there are huge behavioral changes in young children and in adolescents, there's something bigger going on. And it doesn't have to be as, intense or heinous as, what we see on Law and Order SVU, if you've ever seen it. And I don't know who hasn't seen it. But the point that I'm trying to make with that example is that it goes back to how your mental health affects everything in your day-to-day life, And I think it's important to make those notes for yourself, but also for the people around me, around you, around us, especially if you have children, And I have witnessed on more than one occasion where there are parents who don't believe that their children have anything to be sad about, anything to be depressed about, any reason to have anxiety. I won't name this person, but I remember I was telling someone, and I think your daughter's going through a lot. And she's like, what does she have to be going through? She's a child. Yeah, well, children, they see things, they witness things, they hear things. Remember, kids are cruel. I've said it before. Kids are cruel. We don't know what they're dealing with in school, outside of school, at home. When you're not around, maybe it's something you're doing, right? We can't be completely blameless in whatever is going on in our kids' lives and affecting our children. We can't be so high on a pedestal that we're blameless in it all. It's time to take self-inventory. And I'll share something with you that I have not shared with a lot of people. And I don't believe I've talked about it in detail on this podcast before. But when I was young, when I was a kid, towards the end of elementary school, the beginning of middle school, I was severely unhappy. Severely unhappy. And I felt like my parents did not care for what was going on with me mentally. And yeah, sure, it has some things to do with school, but most of my disdain came from home. And I love my parents. As God is my witness, I love my parents. But the truth of the matter is there were so many of us, and my parents were young when they started having children. And I think that, as always, I think that they did the best they could for what they knew at the time, but that doesn't negate how I was handled and how I felt. And I'm getting emotional. I haven't even said what I want to share because I'm honestly having second thoughts, but in the spirit of being completely transparent, I used to be so depressed that I would cut my wrist. And the pain that I felt from using that razor the first time to cut my wrist was nothing in comparison to the mental anguish that I felt on a day-to-day basis. It was almost as if the pain from the blade wasn't pain at all. It was almost as if it made me feel better. And I was just a little girl. I was just a little girl crying out for help. And my parents weren't there to help me, so I tried to find help in another way. And it's just so crazy to think back on that time, because I can literally remember the very day, the first time I ever did it, and it was crazy. It was honestly crazy, and I actually got the idea from some movie that I was watching, and which is crazy, and I thought I would give it a try, and I did, and I continued to do it. And I remember the first time I decided to confess to my mother what I had done, because in my little mind, I thought that, maybe maybe just finally she fully pay attention to me. She fully see the pain I'm in for what it is. And she didn't. And friends, if I can be honest with you, in that moment I felt like she didn't even care. Her exact words to me was that I didn't do it right, because if I did, that I wouldn't be here. I'd be upstairs bleeding out. Well, that took a lot to confess, but it's a fact. And I'll never forget that day. And I'll never forget those words. And I continued to self-harm for a while. Self-harming is when you change your emotional pain into physical pain in order to reduce the overwhelming emotional feelings or thoughts. And it works. I'm a living, breathing testament that it worked for me. And it wasn't the last time. I know I talked about, I don't remember what episode it was, but Starvation Nation, how I used to carve FA into my wrist in order to prevent myself from eating. But that was nothing in comparison to what I did back then. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who has done it, someone who has been through it, self-harm is not the way. Hurting yourself physically in order to deal with your emotional pain is not the way. Back then, I knew nothing about therapy. Back then, I knew nothing about mental health. All I knew was that I was in pain and nobody cared, and I wanted to take the focus off of my pain onto something else. And while my injuries were minor, they can be severe. They have been severe for other people, right? They can leave permanent scars or cause serious health injuries or serious health problems. And I used to have to wear bracelets on my wrist. I didn't wear bracelets for years when I stopped self-harming, because I felt like that if I did wear bracelets, people would think that that's what I was doing or still doing. And now I wear bracelets again, and sometimes I'm like feeling guilty or judged, but nobody thinks that. Nobody knows what I've gone through. But it took a lot for me to overcome that fear of wearing bracelets once I stopped self-harming because of what I had been through. Some other examples on how people self-harm. And again, I'm just giving this as awareness because it's important to be aware. It's important to know the facts, and not just for ourselves, but for the people around us as well. So, other examples of self-harming are outside of cutting yourself, punching yourself or punching things like a wall, burning yourself. People use things like cigarettes, matches, or candles, pulling out your hair, poking objects through body openings, and breaking your bones or bruising yourself. Now, please note, self-harm is not considered a mental disorder. It's a behavior that stems from mental health conditions or problems. People self-harm as an unhealthy way to cope with strong feelings. However, some of the people who self-harm do have mental disorders. But people who self-harm aren't usually trying to attempt suicide. Again, it's just a way to cope, an unhealthy way to cope. However, they are at higher risk for suicide if they are unable to receive the help that they need. This is why it is so imperative to ask for help, to seek help, to find someone you trust who you can confide in, and to seek out professional help if it is necessary, because we want to prevent suicide at all costs. Your life matters, and you deserve to be here, and you deserve to be happy and live in joy, and you don't deserve to feel like you have to harm yourself physically in order to release the pain you feel mentally. And I am someone who has been there, who has done that, and who has overcome it. So I can speak to it. And it's actually so crazy because I had no intention on speaking on self-harm at all, but in the interest of transparency and awareness, it came up and I decided to kind of continue with it and let it flow. Because I do think it's important, and it's not something that's often talked about, even when we are in the space of speaking on mental health. And before we wrap, I just want to go over a few mental health conditions, talk about warning signs, and give a few tips and resources to help you and those you love build their mental fitness and deal with their mental health, because it is so important. I can't stress how serious of a topic this truly is. Mental illnesses and disorders range from mild to severe. And again, they affect a person's thinking, mood, and or behavior. A few examples of mental health illnesses and disorders include depression, which is the number one mental disorder in America, right? It's probably the most common, the most talked about, followed by anxiety disorders, antisocial personality disorder, ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, which I've talked about my long suffering with eating disorders in the episode Starvation Nation. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that episode for further context. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly which episode it is. But also PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, and suicide or suicidal behavior. Oh, and also SAD or seasonal affective disorder, which isn't talked about to the extremity of like being real. So people talk about seasonal depression and things like that a lot. That's real. That's something very real. And just another topic on the long list of mental health illnesses and disorders. So according to the National Institute of Mental Health, nearly 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness. Nearly 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness. And I had to repeat it, and I want you to just sit with that for just a moment and just think about it and consider what that means on a larger scale, right? 1 in 5 adults. So me in a room with 4 other people, chances are at least one of us is presently suffering with a mental illness or disorder. Do we understand what that means? This isn't just 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1,000,000, 1 in 10 million. This is 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness. This is so extreme. It's, oh my goodness, it's almost mind-boggling to think, but it also puts into perspective how serious of a topic this is and how important it is. to spread awareness on mental health and the effects it's having on us, even just here in America. This isn't something that we can continue to look at as taboo or continue to sweep under the rug or continue to go through our everyday life navigating and pretending like it doesn't exist. This is very real. This is very serious. And it's time that we stop shaming and stop feeling ashamed about it and open the door for a bigger conversation on how we can begin to put our mental health at the forefront of everything that we do. I always talk about taking control of your mind. Well, it starts with dealing with your mental health. Because if your mental health is shattered, there's no way you can take control of your mind. And what happens when you don't have control of your mind? Something or someone else does. And not all the time, but often that something else that may have control of your mind comes in the form of alcohol, drug abuse, promiscuity, and a long list of other things that we do to cope that are unhealthy. And I also want to note that a common misconception is that having a serious mental illness is considered a weakness or a character flaw. That's not true. And it's not something that just passes or can be snapped out of with just sheer willpower. And again, I'm no expert, so I'm not here to go into detail of every single mental illness and disorder and let you know where it ranges from mild to severe. But there are also different classifications of mental illnesses, and some won't just be solved by venting to a friend. Some won't just be solved by a few therapy sessions. Some won't just be solved by standing and saying affirmations in the mirror. Some require intense healing sessions and sometimes medication. And unfortunately, there are a few mental illnesses and disorders that people do have to live with for the rest of their lives. But with that fact, it does not mean that all hope is lost. It's still important to talk to your doctor, to seek therapy, counseling, and make a decision on what's going to be best for you. This is not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Everybody's different. Everybody's body is different. Everybody handles things differently and are on a different timeline as far as the healing and the dealing process. And I think that that is a super important fact to note. And there are many factors that contribute to mental health conditions, which include biological, life experiences, family history and of mental health problems. So all those things must be taken into account and consideration when you come face to face with a potential mental illness or disorder. I'm going to list a few warning signs and symptoms that you may want to consider as it pertains to yourself and those around you, because we must be situationally aware. We must have a deep awareness for the people around us, because some of these may seem like just natural everyday things, and sometimes they might be natural everyday things. So there's a context that's involved. Okay, keep that in mind. Warning signs and symptoms include eating or sleeping too much or too late. I'm guilty of that. Pulling away from people and usual activities, having low or no energy, feeling numb or like nothing matters. And I want to stop there, because I think it's important that when people feel numb, or like nothing matters, that they don't want to be here, they don't care if they live or die, can be the first telltale sign of a tragedy brewing. So again, pay attention. Take these things seriously. Continuing. Having unexplained aches and pains, feeling helpless or hopeless, smoking, drinking, or using drugs more than usual, feeling unusually confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, or scared, yelling or fighting with family and friends, outside of the usual, experiencing severe mood swings that cause problems in relationships, having persistent thoughts and memories you can't get out of your head, hearing voices or believing that things are not true, thinking of harming yourself or others, and the inability to perform daily tasks like taking care of your kids or getting to work or school. Having a mental health condition can make it a struggle to do daily tasks, okay? Such as going to school, going to work, sticking to a regular schedule, having healthy relationships, maintaining good hygiene, amongst other things. Which brings me back to, I know I've talked about this before, that when I go into someone's house or I go into someone's room and it's dirty, disorganized, and just in complete disarray, I always take that as a physical representation of their mental state at that current point in their life. I think a lot of times as a society, we chalk it up to people being lazy or just flat out disgusting. But may you consider that it has something to do with their mental stability. I can think back to a time when I think it was my second apartment. Might have been my first, might have been both. And my room was always a mess. There was clothes everywhere. Everything was disorganized. I had papers and things piled up on my dresser to the point where I could barely see the mirror. And when I think back to that time in my life, my mental state wasn't the best. I can be honest about that. And I think just living in that experience, while the rest of my house was clean and presentable, my room, my safe space, my humble abode was in shambles. Why? Because my mind was in shambles. And even now in present day, when I notice my room getting a little chaotic and things being disorganized, I have to take a step back and think about what's presently going on in my life. And sometimes I can have a laundry list of things to do. And I will not attempt to do anything on that list until I clean my room. Because it is a physical representation of your mental state. And it's time that we stop shaming and stop feeling ashamed of our environment when we're not in a good mental space. But it is also our responsibility to find a way to get out of that funk. You know what I mean? And it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. You're going to sit in it for a while. I'm going to be honest with you. But at some point you have to stand up and you have to take action. With that being said, here are a few tips for living well with a mental health condition. Number 1, practice good self-care. I know. Easier said than done. Sometimes it's hard to map out that time to be able to take care of yourself, especially when you have children or family, a busy schedule. But I strongly encourage you to make that time. Even if it's just for an hour, once a week, it's going to make a huge difference in your life. And whatever self-care looks like for you. I like to get my hair done, my nails done, take a bath, go out to eat, take myself on a little date, maybe get a facial, a massage. You can read a book. You can just go to the park, sit in nature. And I'm just listing things that I enjoy doing, but that I know can make a huge impact on, your mental health through self-care, right? So, whatever that looks like for you, number 1, practice good self-care. Prioritize good self-care. Number 2, develop good coping skills. We've already talked about unhealthy coping skills. It's important to establish healthy coping skills that can help you deal with your stress easier. Which brings me into number 3. Seek care from a professional. Whether that's having a conversation with your primary care doctor to be open and honest and see what their recommendations are for the next steps, or finding a therapist, a psychiatrist, reaching out to family or a trusted friend. Seek help from an outside source. Number 4, stick to a treatment plan. Once you have spoken with your doctor, your therapist, your psychiatrist, and they tell you what those next steps are and the plan that they have in place to get you in a better space mentally, do what they say. Don't be hard-headed. It's not going to be an easy road. Trust me, I know. I'm a living, breathing testament that it's not going to be easy, but it is not impossible. It is not impossible. When you change, everything changes. Lastly, number 5, get enough sleep. Good sleep improves your brain performance, your mood, and your overall health. And I'm not one to talk because I don't get enough sleep. I should probably be asleep right now. But I can attest that when I am getting good sleep, everything's so much better. Like, life is so much better. Even on the worst days, I wake up in the best mood and I go through the day in the best mood because I got enough sleep. I am well rested so that the everyday stressors in life are a little less, just a little bit, but a little less impactful because I'm well rested and well fed. There are so many ways, like I said, in today's time to find support. You can go to findsupport.gov and learn about treatments, ways to cope, help with paying for treatments, if that's kind of like a barrier for you. And you can learn tips to talk to loved ones who you believe are struggling with mental health and kind of how to have that difficult conversation. And it doesn't just give you tips on issues with mental health. It also gives you tips and treatment options if you're battling with drug and alcohol abuse. You can call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Hotline, or go to 988lifeline.org for free confidential support for people in distress. And it gives you resources for prevention in a crisis. Lastly, I encourage you to listen to Season 1, Episode 35, Navigating Uncertainty. Because life happens every single day, even when you don't want it to. And in that episode, I talk about navigating through life's changes and the uncertainty when you're in a certain space in your life. And it also has a lot more resources within that episode for dealing with life, for dealing with stressful situations, for dealing with crisis situations, for dealing with uncertainty. There is a plethora of resources that I provided within that episode. So again, I encourage you, if you feel it necessary, to go back and listen to that episode. In addition, make sure to follow House of Trauma Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook for daily mental health updates, encouragement, facts, and more awareness for the entire month of May. Because in 2024, we are making our mental health our number one priority. My name is Kiana Bree Ann, This is the House of Trauma podcast. As always, I thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. I hope this episode has blessed you, and I hope to see you next week for an all new episode. Love you. Mean it. Bye.